The bullet that grazed Josephine Miller's shoulder in the dusty streets of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, on a scorching afternoon in July 1878, was meant for the bank manager, but she had pushed him aside just in time to save his life while nearly losing her own. Wade Richardson had been riding past the newly established First National Bank when he heard the shot ring out, and without thinking, he dismounted his chestnut mare and rushed toward the chaos unfolding before him. The bank robbers were already fleeing on horseback, their faces covered with red bandanas, leaving behind a scene of confusion, and a young woman bleeding in the street. Wade pressed his hands against her shoulder, his calloused fingers applying pressure to stop the bleeding while his heart hammered in his chest. Her green eyes met his for the first time, wide with shock and pain, her chestnut hair falling loose from its pins and spreading across the dirt road like autumn leaves. She wore a simple blue cotton dress that was now stained crimson, and despite the agony she must have been feeling, she managed to speak through gritted teeth. "Is he alive?" The manager. Wade glanced over his shoulder to see the portly man being helped to his feet by several townspeople, completely unharmed thanks to this woman's courage. "He's fine, thanks to you. Now hold still while we get you to the doctor." "I do not need a doctor," she insisted, though her face had gone pale as milk and her hands trembled where they clutched at his arms. "It is just a scratch. That scratch is bleeding through my hands, miss. You are going to the doctor whether you like it or not." Wade scooped her up into his arms before she could protest further, ignoring the way she stiffened against him. He carried her down Main Street toward Doc Harrison's office, her weight barely registering as his long legs ate up the distance. People gathered on the wooden sidewalks to watch, whispering among themselves about the brave young woman and the handsome cowboy who had come to her rescue. Doc Harrison met them at his door, ushering them inside his small practice that smelled of carbolic acid and dried herbs. The elderly physician had been tending to the people of Eureka Springs since the town's founding just 9 years earlier, and his steady hands had seen everything from childbirth to gunshot wounds. He directed Wade to lay Josephine on the examination table, then shooed him toward the door. "I need privacy to examine the young lady properly," Doc Harrison said firmly, though not unkindly. "You can wait outside." Wade hesitated, surprised by his own reluctance to leave this stranger's side. Something about her had captured his attention beyond the dramatic circumstances of their meeting. Perhaps it was the way she had worried about the bank manager before herself, or maybe it was the stubborn tilt of her chin, even as she fought against the pain. Whatever it was, he found himself wanting to stay. "Go on," Josephine said, her voice stronger now despite her pallor. "You have done more than enough already, Mr. Richardson, Wade Richardson." "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I am Josephine Miller, and I am grateful for your assistance." He tipped his hat to her and stepped outside, but he did not leave. Instead, he leaned against the wooden railing of the porch and rolled himself a cigarette, watching the activity in the street below. The sheriff and his deputies had returned from chasing the bank robbers, their faces grim with failure. Wade knew Sheriff Coleman from various dealings around town, having worked on several ranches in the area over the past 2 years since arriving in Arkansas from Texas. "Wade," Sheriff Coleman called out when he spotted him. "You see what happened?" 3 men, riding east out of town on dark horses. All wore red bandanas and dusters. Could not see much else happen too fast. The sheriff nodded, making notes in a small leather journal. "The lady going to be all right?" "Doc's with her now. She took a bullet meant for the bank manager, brave thing." "That is Josephine Miller, one of the new school teachers who arrived last month from St. Louis. Heard she came out here after losing her family to fever. Guess she is as tough as she is pretty." Wade filed away this information, curious about the woman despite himself. He had not been looking for any entanglements when he drifted into Eureka Springs 3 months ago, intending only to work the summer on the Henderson Ranch before moving on as he always did. At 27 years old, he had been moving from place to place since he was 15, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. The wandering life suited him, or so he had always told himself. An hour passed before Doc Harrison emerged, wiping his hands on a clean towel. "She will be fine." The bullet went clean through the fleshy part of her shoulder, missed the bone. "She is young and strong, should heal up nicely if she takes care of it and does not use that arm for a few weeks. Can I see her?" The words were out of Wade's mouth before he could think better of them. Doc Harrison raised one bushy eyebrow. "She is decent now, just resting. Try not to tire her out with too much talking." Wade stepped back inside to find Josephine sitting up on the examination table, her arm bound in clean white bandages and secured in a sling. Someone had brought her a fresh dress to replace her ruined one, a simple yellow cotton that made her skin look less ghostly. Her hair had been hastily pinned back up, though several tendrils still escaped to frame her face. "You are still here," she observed, and he could not tell if she was pleased or annoyed by this fact. "Wanted to make sure you were all right." He stayed near the door, suddenly feeling awkward in her presence now that the immediate crisis had passed. "As you can see, I will survive. Doc Harrison says I was quite fortunate. That was a brave thing you did, pushing the manager out of the way like that." Josephine looked down at her hands, which were clasped in her lap. "I did not think about it, just acted. My father was a soldier. He always said that courage was not the absence of fear but acting despite it." Her voice caught slightly on the word father, and Wade remembered what the sheriff had said about her losing her family. "Your father taught you well." She met his eyes again, and this time he saw the depth of loss there, the kind of grief that left permanent marks on a person's soul. "He taught me many things. I only wish I had more time to learn everything he wanted to share." An uncomfortable silence settled between them, filled with the weight of things unsaid. Wade shifted his feet, unsure what to do next. He was not good at these situations, had spent so many years alone that he had forgotten how to offer comfort or receive it. "You have somewhere to stay? Someone to look after you while you heal?" he asked finally, seizing on the practical aspects of her situation. "I room at the boarding house on Spring Street with Mrs. Patterson. She runs a respectable establishment for unmarried women. I am sure she will take good care of me. Let me walk you there at least. You should not be on your feet alone after losing so much blood." Josephine looked like she wanted to argue, but common sense won out over pride. "Very well. Thank you again, Mr. Richardson. Just Wade is fine. Then you must call me Josephine." He helped her down from the examination table, noting how she swayed slightly on her feet before steadying herself with a hand on his arm. They made their way slowly through the streets of Eureka Springs, past the general store and the saloon, the blacksmith shop and the small church with its white steeple pointing toward the cloudless sky. The town was still relatively new, having been founded in 1879, as people flocked to the area for the natural springs that were said to have healing properties. Already it was growing rapidly, with new businesses opening and families arriving to make their fortunes in this corner of the Ozark Mountains. Mrs. Patterson met them at the door of her tidy boarding house, a sturdy woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that took in every detail of the situation. "Merciful heavens, child, I heard about what happened at the bank. Come in, come in. You need to be lying down." "I am fine, Mrs. Patterson, truly. Mr. Richardson was kind enough to walk me home." The landlady turned her assessing gaze on Wade, and he felt suddenly like a schoolboy being evaluated by a stern teacher. "Richardson, is it? I have seen you around town, working out at the Henderson Ranch. You have a reputation as an honest man, which counts for something in my book. Thank you for looking after our Josephine." "It was my pleasure, madam." Wade tipped his hat to both women. "Miss Miller, I hope you heal quickly." He turned to leave, but Josephine's voice stopped him. "Wade, will I see you again?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Wade knew the smart thing would be to say no, to walk away now before anything began that could complicate his simple, solitary life. But when he looked at her standing there in the doorway, brave and beautiful despite her injury, he found himself nodding. "I will check on you tomorrow if that is all right. Make sure you are recovering well." Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I would like that very much." Wade rode back to the Henderson Ranch in a daze, his mind full of green eyes and auburn hair, of courage and loss and the inexplicable pull he felt toward this woman he barely knew. The ranch sat 5 miles outside of town, a sprawling operation with cattle grazing on rolling hills and horses in well-maintained corrals. He had been hired on as a general ranch hand, doing whatever needed doing from mending fences to breaking horses, and he was good at his work. The physical labor satisfied something in him, kept his restless energy channeled into productive outlets. That night as he lay in his bunk in the ranch hand's quarters, Wade stared at the wooden ceiling and thought about Josephine Miller. He had met plenty of women in his travels, had even fancied himself in love once or twice when he was younger, but something about her felt different. Maybe it was the way she had put someone else's safety before her own, or maybe it was the recognition of a kindred spirit, someone else who carried the weight of loss like a stone in their pocket. Sleep came fitfully, and when Wade rose the next morning with the sun, he found himself counting the hours until he could reasonably ride into town to check on her. He worked through his morning chores with unusual distraction, earning curious looks from the other ranch hands who were used to his focused efficiency. "You feeling all right, Wade?" asked Thomas Murphy, a grizzled cowboy in his 50s who had taken Wade under his wing when he first arrived. "You have been staring at that fence post for 5 minutes without driving a single nail." Wade shook his head to clear it. "Sorry, Thomas. Mind elsewhere today. Let me guess. This has something to do with that pretty schoolteacher you rescued yesterday. News travels fast in a small town." "I just want to make sure she is healing properly, that is all." Thomas chuckled, the knowing laugh of a man who had seen it all before. "Sure, sure. That is what they all say. Word of advice, though, son. That girl is quality, the marrying kind. If you are just looking for a dalliance, best leave her be. But if you are serious, well, sometimes the best things in life are the ones we were not looking for." Wade thought about Thomas's words as he finished his work and cleaned himself up before heading into town. Was he serious about Josephine? Could he be, after knowing her for less than a day? It seemed absurd, the kind of romantic nonsense found in dime novels, not in real life. And yet there was no denying the anticipation that thrummed through his veins as he rode toward Eureka Springs, the way his heart picked up speed when Mrs. Patterson's boarding house came into view. This time, Mrs. Patterson answered his knock with a more welcoming expression. "Mr. Richardson, how good of you to call. Josephine is in the parlor. She has been expecting you." He found her seated in a comfortable chair near the window, a book open in her lap, though she did not appear to be reading it. She looked better than yesterday, with more color in her cheeks and a brightness to her eyes that had been dimmed by pain and shock. She wore a modest green dress that matched her eyes, and her hair was properly arranged in a neat bun at the nape of her neck. "Wade," she greeted him with obvious pleasure. "I was hoping you would come. I said I would." He took the seat she indicated across from her, his hat balanced on his knee. "How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thank you." "The pain has lessened considerably, though Doc Harrison insists I must be very careful with my shoulder for several weeks at least. He says I am fortunate to have avoided infection." They fell into easy conversation, discovering shared interests and experiences despite their different backgrounds. Josephine told him about growing up in St. Louis, the daughter of an Army captain and a schoolteacher mother. She had been the middle child of 5, with 2 older brothers and 2 younger sisters, all of whom had succumbed to yellow fever during an outbreak the previous summer. She had survived by chance, having been visiting a friend in the countryside when the illness struck her family's home. "I watched them all buried within a week," she said quietly, her hands tightening on the book in her lap. "My parents, my siblings, everyone I loved gone in the blink of an eye. I could not stay in St. Louis after that. Everything reminded me of them. When I saw the advertisement for teachers needed in Arkansas, it seemed like a sign, a chance to start over somewhere new." Wade understood that need to escape, though his reasons had been different. "I left home when I was 15. My father was a hard man, mean when he drank, which was most of the time. My mother died bringing my sister into the world, and after that, he just seemed to give up on everything except the bottle. I stayed as long as I could for my sister's sake, but one night he came at me with a belt and I hit him back, knocked him cold. I knew if I stayed, one of us would end up killing the other, so I took my sister to our aunt's house and left before morning." "Where is your sister now?" Josephine asked gently. "Sarah got married 3 years back to a good man, a shopkeeper in Dallas. She writes to me sometimes when she can track down where I am. Last I heard, she had 2 little boys and another baby on the way. Do you ever think about settling down somewhere?" "Having a family of your own," Wade shifted uncomfortably. "Never seemed like it was in the cards for me. I am not good at staying in one place. Get restless after a while, need to see what is over the next hill." "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, surprising himself with his honesty. "But it is what I know, what I am good at." Josephine studied him with those penetrating green eyes, and he had the uncomfortable feeling that she could see straight through to his core, to all the fears and doubts he kept carefully hidden. "Maybe you have never had a reason to stay before." The implication hung between them, heavy with meaning. Wade opened his mouth to respond, but Mrs. Patterson entered with a tea tray, breaking the moment. They spent the next hour talking about lighter things, about the town and its people, about Josephine's work as a teacher and Wade's various experiences as a ranch hand. He found himself telling her stories he had not thought about in years, making her laugh with tales of mishaps and adventures from his wandering years. When he finally took his leave, promising to visit again soon, Wade felt something shift inside him, like a door opening in a room he had kept locked for years. He rode back to the ranch in contemplative silence, Thomas's words echoing in his mind. Was Josephine Miller a reason to stay? Could she be? Over the following weeks, Wade found himself riding into town every chance he got, always with some excuse or another, but really just to see Josephine. He helped her carry books to the schoolhouse once her shoulder healed enough for her to return to teaching. He escorted her to the town social on Saturday night, where they danced carefully to avoid jarring her injury. He sat with her on Mrs. Patterson's porch in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing while the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold. The townspeople noticed, of course. In a place as small as Eureka Springs, nothing went unobserved for long. Wade became aware of the speculative looks, the knowing smiles, the way conversations would pause when he entered the general store or the saloon. Josephine's fellow teachers, Miss Sarah Cooper and Miss Elizabeth Hayes, began to tease her gently about her cowboy suitor, though always in good spirits. "He is quite handsome," Miss Cooper observed one afternoon as the three women prepared lessons for the following week. "And from what I hear, he has been nothing but respectful in his attentions toward you." "Wade is a good man," Josephine agreed, unable to keep the warmth from her voice when she spoke his name. "But he is also someone who has never stayed in one place for long. I worry about what that means." "Have you asked him about his intentions?" Miss Hayes inquired, ever practical. "Not directly, no. I suppose I am afraid of the answer." It was true. As Josephine's feelings for Wade deepened with each passing day, so too did her fear of what would come next. She could see that he cared for her. It was evident in the way he looked at her, the gentle consideration he showed in all their interactions, the way he always seemed to know what she needed before she asked. But caring was not the same as staying, and she had lost too much already to survive another abandonment. The moment of truth came on a September evening, 2 months after they had first met. Wade had brought a picnic supper, and they sat together on a blanket overlooking the valley, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The air had finally cooled from the brutal summer heat, carrying the first hints of autumn on the breeze. "I need to tell you something," Wade said, his voice unusually serious. "I got an offer today. There is a ranch in Colorado looking for an experienced foreman. The pay is good and it would be steady work through the winter. I told them I would think about it." Josephine's heart plummeted, though she tried to keep her expression neutral. "Colorado is very far from Arkansas. I know." He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "That is what makes this so hard. Before I met you, I would have jumped at the opportunity without a second thought. But now, the idea of leaving, of not seeing you every day, it tears me up inside." "Then do not go," she whispered, hardly daring to breathe. "It is not that simple, Josephine. This is who I am, what I do. I drift from place to place, never putting down roots. What kind of life could I offer you if I stayed? I am just a ranch hand with nothing to my name except a horse and some saved wages." She pulled her hands from his, wrapping her arms around herself. "What are you saying exactly?" "I am saying I do not know what to do. I care about you more than I have ever cared about anyone, but I am terrified of disappointing you. Everyone I have ever cared about, I have let them down eventually. My mother died, my sister I abandoned. I cannot seem to hold on to anything good." "You did not abandon your sister. You saved both of you from a terrible situation," Josephine said firmly. "And you cannot control death and sickness. But you can control this choice, Wade. You can choose to stay or you can choose to go, but you cannot have it both ways." "What do you want me to do?" Josephine stood, moving to the edge of the overlook where she could see the lights of Eureka Springs twinkling in the valley below. Her shoulder ached slightly, a phantom pain that reminded her of how they had met, of the split-second decision that had changed both their lives. "I am afraid," she said finally, her voice barely audible over the evening wind. "I am afraid of caring too much, of loving you and then losing you like I have lost everyone else. I'm afraid of goodbye, Wade. I do not think I could survive another one." He came to stand behind her, his presence warm and solid at her back. "Then let us make every moment count," he said softly. "I do not have all the answers, Josephine. I cannot promise that I will never want to leave, or that staying here would not make me restless sometimes. But I can promise that right now, in this moment, there is nowhere else I would rather be than with you. And maybe that is enough to build on. Maybe we take it one day at a time and see where it leads." She turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks, though she was not sure if they were sad or happy. You would stay. Give up the Colorado job, I would try. For you, I would try. He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away her tears. I cannot promise perfect, but I can promise to do my best, if you will have me. I will have you, she breathed, and then his lips were on hers, tender and sweet and full of promise. It was not her first kiss. She had been courted briefly in St. Louis before tragedy struck, but it was the first that made her feel like she was home, like all the pieces of herself that had scattered with her family's death were finally coming back together. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I need to court you properly, he said. Talk to Mrs. Patterson about calling on you officially, maybe speak to Reverend Matthews about his blessing. Mrs. Patterson already approves of you, she told me so last week. Said you have kind eyes and a good work ethic. He laughed, the sound rich and warm in the gathering darkness. High praise from that formidable woman. What about you, Josephine Miller? What do you think of me? I think, she said slowly, choosing her words with care, that you are the most genuine person I have met since coming to Arkansas. I think you are brave and kind and far more worthy than you give yourself credit for. I think I am falling in love with you, Wade Richardson, and it terrifies me and thrills me in equal measure. I love you too, he said, the words seeming to surprise him as much as her. I think I have loved you since that first moment in the street, when you were more worried about a stranger than yourself. You are extraordinary, Josephine, and I want to be the kind of man who deserves you. They stayed on that hillside until the stars filled the sky like diamonds scattered across black velvet, talking and kissing and planning a future that suddenly seemed possible. Wade spoke to the owner of the Henderson Ranch the next day, asking about the possibility of permanent employment and a small house on the property. Mr. Henderson, who had been impressed with Wade's work and character, agreed immediately, offering wages that would allow Wade to support a family if he was careful. The courtship that followed was the talk of Eureka Springs, though in the best possible way. Wade was patient and attentive, showing up at the schoolhouse each day to walk Josephine home, sitting in the back of her classroom on occasion to watch her teach with passion and dedication. He fixed things around Mrs. Patterson's boarding house without being asked, earning him even more favor with the landlady. He attended church every Sunday, sitting in the pew beside Josephine and surprising himself by finding comfort in the familiar hymns and sermons. Josephine bloomed under his steady attention, the shadows of grief that had haunted her eyes gradually fading as joy took their place. She introduced Wade to her students, delighting in how gentle he was with the children, answering their endless questions about ranch life and horses with infinite patience. She packed him lunches to take to work, sweet notes tucked among the sandwiches and apples that made him smile in the middle of hard days. They had their challenges, of course. Wade struggled with his restless nature, fighting against the urge to saddle his horse and ride when problems arose. Josephine wrestled with her fear of loss, sometimes pulling away emotionally when things felt too good, too perfect, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But they talked through these difficulties, learning each other's patterns and triggers, building trust brick by careful brick. 3 months after that pivotal evening on the hillside, Wade asked Mr. Henderson if he could have an advance on his wages. The rancher, who had grown fond of his dependable foreman, agreed without hesitation, and Wade rode into town to visit the jeweler who had recently opened shop on Main Street. The selection of rings was limited, but he found one that seemed perfect, a simple gold band with a small emerald that matched Josephine's eyes. He proposed on Christmas Eve, in the same spot where they had first acknowledged their feelings for each other. Snow had begun to fall, rare for Arkansas but magical nonetheless, dusting the valley in white. Josephine said yes before he even finished asking the question, throwing her arms around his neck and kissing him so enthusiastically that they both nearly tumbled off the blanket he had spread on the frozen ground. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes, she laughed through happy tears. I want to marry you, Wade Richardson. I want to build a life with you and have your children and grow old watching sunsets from this very hill. I want that too, he said, slipping the ring onto her finger where it fit perfectly. I want everything with you, Josephine. You have made me believe in home again, in the possibility of happiness. I promise to work every day to be worthy of the gift you are giving me. They were married in February of 1879, in the small white church on the hill with what seemed like the entire town of Eureka Springs in attendance. Josephine wore a dress of cream-colored silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit her smaller frame by Mrs. Patterson and the other boarding house residents. Wade wore a new suit purchased especially for the occasion, his normally unruly hair tamed with pomade, his boots polished to a high shine. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, speaking about the power of love to heal old wounds and create new beginnings. Josephine's fellow teachers served as her bridesmaids, while Thomas Murphy stood up as Wade's best man, looking uncomfortable in his Sunday best, but beaming with pride for the young man he had come to see as a son. When Wade kissed his bride for the first time as her husband, the gathered crowd erupted in cheers and applause. They walked back down the aisle hand in hand, Josephine's face glowing with happiness, Wade's heart so full he thought it might burst. A reception followed at the community hall, with food provided by half the town and music supplied by a fiddle player and his guitar-playing brother. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Richardson?" Wade asked formally, bowing low over Josephine's hand. "You may have all my dances, Mr. Richardson," she replied, allowing him to sweep her onto the floor for their first waltz as husband and wife. They moved together as naturally as breathing, Wade's hand firm on her waist, Josephine's head resting against his shoulder. Around them, other couples joined in, but they barely noticed, lost in their own world of joy and promise. "Are you happy?" Wade whispered into her hair. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. "You have given me back something I thought I lost forever when my family died." "Hope, Wade. You have given me hope for the future. You have given me the same, along with a reason to stay put for the first time in my adult life. I love you, Josephine Richardson. I love you more than words can express." Mr. Henderson had given them the use of a small house on the edge of his property, a two-room cabin that had been built for the previous foreman but stood empty after he moved on. It was not much, but Josephine and several of the town's women had worked to make it cozy, with curtains on the windows and quilts on the bed, a well-stocked larder and wildflowers in mason jars on every surface. Wade carried his bride over the threshold as tradition demanded, both of them laughing at the awkwardness of maneuvering through the narrow doorway. He set her down gently in the middle of their small parlor, suddenly nervous in a way he had not been even facing down armed men. "This is really happening," he said, his voice slightly awed. "We are really married." "We are," Josephine confirmed, reaching up to loosen his collar. "And I believe it is customary for husbands and wives to share certain intimacies on their wedding night." Wade's response was to gather her close and kiss her with all the pent-up longing of their careful courtship, conveying without words just how much he desired her, loved her, cherished her. They made their way to the bedroom slowly, pausing frequently for more kisses, for whispered endearments, for the simple joy of being together without chaperones or propriety to hold them back. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of gentle discoveries and soft laughter, of whispered reassurances and gasped pleasure. Wade was careful with her, remembering her injury though it had long since healed, treating her like the precious gift she was. Josephine gave herself to him completely, holding nothing back, trusting him with her body as she already trusted him with her heart. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the quilts, Josephine's head on Wade's chest, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The lamp still burned low on the bedside table, casting golden light over their entwined forms. "Thank you," Wade said quietly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me worth staying for. For taking a chance on a drifter with nothing to offer but his heart." Josephine propped herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. "You have never been just a drifter to me, Wade. From the very first moment, you were the man who ran toward danger to help a stranger. The man who carried me to the doctor and waited to make sure I was all right. The man who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. You are my hero, my husband, my home." He pulled her down for another kiss, this one slower and deeper, leading naturally to another round of lovemaking that lasted well into the night. They finally fell asleep just before dawn, wrapped around each other like they were afraid to let go even in unconsciousness. Their first year of marriage was an adjustment, learning to share space and make decisions together, navigating the small conflicts that arose when two independent people tried to build a life as one. Wade sometimes grew quiet and distant, wrestling with impulses he could not always name, and Josephine had to learn to give him space while still providing support. Josephine occasionally had nightmares about her lost family, waking in tears that Wade learned to soothe with gentle words and patient presence. But more than the struggles, there were joys. Wade proved to be an attentive and considerate husband, always thinking of small ways to make Josephine's life easier or more pleasant. He built her a bookshelf for the growing collection of volumes she accumulated, carved her a jewelry box for the few pieces she owned, planted a vegetable garden outside their door so she would have fresh produce throughout the summer. Josephine made their house a home, learning to cook the foods Wade preferred, mending his clothes with neat, invisible stitches, keeping everything clean and organized despite her long days teaching. She also made sure Wade knew he was appreciated, leaving him notes of encouragement when he faced difficult tasks at the ranch, greeting him each evening with enthusiasm no matter how tired she was, listening with genuine interest to his stories about his workday. Their physical relationship deepened and evolved, moving from the tentative exploration of their wedding night to something more confident and passionate. They learned what pleased each other, what made the other gasp or moan or laugh with delight. Josephine discovered that she loved the feel of Wade's calloused hands on her skin, the way his strength gentled when he touched her. Wade found that he could lose himself completely in his wife's embrace, that the restlessness that had plagued him for years quieted when he held her close. By the summer of 1879, Josephine began to suspect she was pregnant. She kept her suspicions to herself at first, wanting to be certain before saying anything to Wade, but when her monthly bleeding failed to arrive for the third time, and she found herself queasy each morning, she knew it was time to share the news. She chose a Sunday afternoon when Wade had no work obligations, preparing his favorite meal of fried chicken and biscuits. They ate on the porch, enjoying the warm breeze and the view of the mountains in the distance. After the meal was cleared away and they sat together on the swing Wade had built, Josephine took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you," she began, suddenly nervous despite knowing Wade would be thrilled. "I went to see Doc Harrison yesterday." Wade tensed immediately, his protective instincts kicking in. "Are you ill? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. In fact, something is very right." She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby, Wade. You are going to be a father." The expression that crossed his face was one she would remember forever, pure wonder mixed with terror and joy and love. He opened his mouth several times without managing to form words, tears springing to his eyes as the reality sank in. "A baby," he finally whispered. "We are having a baby." "Yes, Doc Harrison estimates sometime in late January or early February." Wade let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town, then immediately looked stricken. "I am sorry, I should not have been so loud. Is that bad for the baby? Are you feeling all right? Should you be sitting outside? Maybe you should lie down." Josephine laughed at his sudden overprotectiveness. "I am fine, Wade. Pregnancy is not an illness. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." I know, but you are not just any woman. You are my woman, my wife, and you are carrying our child." He placed both hands on her stomach now, as if trying to feel the tiny life growing inside her. "I am going to be a father. I am terrified." "So am I," she admitted. "But we will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." Wade's protectiveness only intensified as the pregnancy progressed. He insisted on walking Josephine to and from the schoolhouse despite her protests, worried about her navigating the paths alone. He took over more of the household chores, refusing to let her lift anything heavy or overexert herself. When she finally had to give up teaching in her 6th month because the children's desk no longer accommodated her growing belly, he supported the decision, even though it meant losing her income. Josephine bore his hovering with patient amusement, understanding that it came from a place of love and fear. Wade had lost his mother in childbirth, and though he did not speak of it directly, she knew he feared history repeating itself. She did everything Doc Harrison advised, resting when told to rest, eating nourishing foods, taking gentle walks for exercise but nothing too strenuous. The women of Eureka Springs rallied around the expectant couple, hosting a party where they showered Josephine with gifts of tiny clothes and blankets, offering advice both wanted and unwanted about labor and motherhood. Mrs. Patterson knitted a beautiful baby blanket in soft yellow wool, tears in her eyes as she presented it. "You are like a daughter to me," the older woman said, hugging Josephine carefully. "I am so happy to see you building this beautiful life after everything you have endured." Winter arrived with unusual harshness, snow falling heavily in January and making travel difficult. Wade worried constantly about what would happen if Josephine went into labor during a storm, so he made arrangements with Doc Harrison to stay at their cabin for the final 2 weeks before her due date. The doctor agreed, moving into their tiny spare room and waiting patiently for nature to take its course. Labor began on a frigid February morning in 1880, 3 days before Josephine's calculated due date. The pain started slowly, almost gentle at first, allowing Wade to boil water and lay out clean linens as Doc Harrison directed. But as the hours progressed and the contractions intensified, Josephine's calm facade crumbled and Wade found himself fighting panic. "She is in so much pain," he said to Doc Harrison during one of the brief respites between contractions. "Is not there something you can give her? This is normal, son. Labor hurts. There is no way around it, but Miss Josephine is strong and the baby is positioned well. Everything is progressing as it should." Wade returned to his wife's side, holding her hand and wiping the sweat from her forehead with a cool cloth. "You are doing so well, my love. I am so proud of you. This is your fault. Josephine gritted out as another contraction seized her, squeezing Wade's hand hard enough to hurt. But the moment it passed, she looked at him apologetically. "I am sorry. I did not mean that." "You can blame me all you want if it helps," he assured her, kissing her damp forehead. "I love you, Josephine. You are the strongest, bravest person I know." The labor continued through the day and into the evening, exhausting everyone involved. Wade refused to leave Josephine's side despite Doc Harrison's suggestions that he might want to wait elsewhere. He could not abandon her, not when she needed him most, even though watching her suffer was the hardest thing he had ever done. Finally, as the moon rose high outside their window, Doc Harrison announced that it was time to push. Wade supported Josephine's shoulders, helping her sit up through the grueling final stage of labor, whispering encouragement even as his own heart threatened to beat out of his chest with fear and anticipation. And then, after what seemed like an eternity but was really only 20 minutes, a baby's cry filled the cabin, strong and loud and unmistakably alive. "It is a boy," Doc Harrison announced, holding up the squalling infant for his parents to see. "A big, healthy boy with a fine set of lungs." Wade could not speak, could barely breathe as he watched the doctor clean their son and wrap him in one of the soft blankets the town women had provided. When Doc Harrison placed the baby in Josephine's arms, Wade felt something shift fundamentally in his understanding of the universe. This tiny person with his shock of dark hair and red, wrinkled face was his son, his child, his family. "Hello, little one," Josephine whispered, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "We have been waiting so long to meet you." "He is perfect," Wade managed, his voice hoarse with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Josephine. Thank you for this gift." They named him William Andrew Richardson, after Wade's grandfather and Josephine's father. Little William was indeed healthy and strong as Doc Harrison had assessed, and he settled into life with the loud demands typical of newborns. Those first weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, of learning to change diapers and soothe cries, of marveling over every tiny yawn and stretch. Wade threw himself into fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to everything he cared about. He learned to walk the floor at night with William when Josephine was too exhausted, singing soft cowboy ballads to quiet the baby's fussing. He carved toys and built a beautiful cradle, his skilled hands creating treasures for his son. He worked extra hours at the ranch to save money for William's future, determined that his child would have the security and opportunities he himself had never known. Josephine watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love, if that was possible. The gentleness Wade showed William, the utter devotion in his eyes when he looked at the baby, proved what she had always known. That beneath his rough exterior beat the heart of a good man, someone capable of tremendous love and loyalty. As William grew from infant to toddler, the Richardson family settled into comfortable rhythms. Josephine returned to teaching part-time, with Mrs. Patterson happily watching William during the hours she was at the schoolhouse. Wade continued to excel at his work, earning increased responsibilities and wages from Mr. Henderson, who saw in the young foreman the same dedication and skill that made him invaluable to the ranch's success. They expanded their little cabin, adding 2 more rooms as their savings allowed. Wade did most of the work himself with help from Thomas Murphy and some of the other ranch hands, refusing to go into debt when patient labor could accomplish the same goal. By William's 2nd birthday, they had a proper 4-room house with a large porch and a barn for the 2 horses Wade had purchased. Life was good, better than either of them had dared imagine during those early days of courtship when their future seemed so uncertain. But the true test of Wade's commitment to staying came in the spring of 1882. when a rancher from Montana visited Eureka Springs looking to hire experienced cowboys for a major cattle drive north. The pay being offered was substantial, enough to set a man up nicely if he was willing to spend 6 months on the trail. Several of the local cowboys signed on immediately, excited by the adventure and the money. Thomas Murphy, seeing Wade's interest, warned him about the price of such decisions. "I have done my share of cattle drives," the older man said as they worked together to repair a section of fence. "The money is good, that is true, but 6 months is a long time to be away from a wife and child. And the trail changes a man sometimes, reminds him of what it feels like to be free and untethered. You have to ask yourself if that is worth risking what you have got here." Wade said nothing, but that night as he lay in bed with Josephine curled against his side and William sleeping peacefully in his cradle, he wrestled with temptation. Part of him, the part that had spent a dozen years drifting from place to place, yearned for the adventure of the drive. But the larger part, the part that had grown and matured over the past 4 years, knew exactly where he belonged. "You are thinking about Montana," Josephine said quietly, proving that she knew him too well to be fooled by his silence. "I am," he admitted. "Not because I want to leave, but because old habits are hard to break. That restless part of me hears about a cattle drive and remembers what it felt like to move with no destination in mind. Do you regret staying? Regret marrying me and settling down?" Wade rolled to face her, needing her to see the truth in his eyes. "Never. Not for one single moment. You and William are the best things that ever happened to me. That restless feeling, it still shows up sometimes, but it is getting quieter every year. And I have learned that the adventure is not out there on some trail. The real adventure is right here, watching our son grow, building our life together, loving you more with each passing day. But if you wanted to go, if you really needed to, I would not stop you," Josephine said, though her voice shook slightly. "I meant what I said about being afraid of goodbyes, but I have also learned that love means giving someone the freedom to choose. I would wait for you, Wade. I would hate every moment you were gone, but I would wait." He kissed her then, long and deep, pouring every ounce of his love and commitment into the connection. When they finally broke apart, he traced her cheekbone with his thumb. "I know you would wait, and that is exactly why I am not going. I made you a promise on that hillside 4 years ago that I would make every moment count. I cannot do that from Montana. I can only do that here with you." The Montana rancher left Eureka Springs a week later with his hired cowboys, but Wade Richardson was not among them. Instead, he was at home with his family, teaching 2-year-old William how to feed the chickens and stealing kisses from his wife when the boy was not looking. He had made his choice, and he had never been more certain of anything in his life. The years rolled on with the steady progression of seasons, each one bringing new joys and challenges. Josephine discovered she was pregnant again in the fall of 1883, and this time Wade was calm rather than panicked, confident from experience that his wife was strong enough to handle anything. Their daughter Margaret Rose was born the following May, a tiny, delicate creature with her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. William was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding time. Wade and Josephine watched their children together with hearts full of gratitude, marveling at the family they had created from the ashes of their separate losses. "You ever think about your first family?" Wade asked one night after the children were asleep. "Do you wish they could see what you have built?" "Every day," Josephine admitted. "I wish my mother could see me as a mother, that my father could meet his grandchildren, that my siblings could watch William and Margaret grow. But I also know they would be happy for me, proud that I did not let grief destroy me. What about you? Do you ever think about your father sometimes?" I hope he found some peace before he died, though I doubt it, but I also know I am nothing like him. I used to worry I would turn into him, that I carried that same darkness. But you and the children, you have shown me that I can be different, that I am different. As their children grew, Wade and Josephine made sure to instill in them the values they held dear: courage, kindness, honesty, and the importance of education. William showed an early aptitude for working with animals, following his father around the ranch and absorbing everything Wade could teach him. Margaret was more bookish like her mother, learning to read before she was 5 and devouring every story she could get her hands on. In 1887, when William was 7 and Margaret 3, Josephine discovered she was pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, leaving her exhausted and nauseated for months. Doc Harrison, now in his 70s but still practicing, kept a close watch on her, concerned about complications. Wade curtailed his work responsibilities as much as possible, wanting to be near Josephine during this difficult time. Mr. Henderson, understanding and himself now a grandfather, encouraged Wade to focus on his family, assuring him his job would be waiting whenever he was ready to return to full duties. The baby, another boy they named Henry Thomas after Josephine's brother and Wade's mentor, arrived 2 weeks early but healthy despite his mother's difficult pregnancy. Josephine recovered slowly, her strength returning gradually over the course of several months. Wade took over most of the child care and household duties during this time, proving himself more than capable of managing a home while his wife healed. "I do not know what I would do without you," Josephine said one evening as she watched Wade simultaneously help William with his arithmetic, rock Henry to sleep, and keep Margaret from eating too many cookies before supper. "You are an extraordinary man, Wade Richardson." "I am just doing what needs doing," he replied, but she could see the pleasure her words brought him. "You have always been there for me, for our family. It is my honor to be here for you when you need me." Life settled into new patterns with 3 children to raise. The house that had seemed spacious with 1 child felt cramped with 3, so Wade began planning an addition, working on it whenever time and weather permitted. The whole family pitched in, with William enthusiastically hammering nails under his father's supervision, and even little Margaret carrying small boards from the pile. By 1890, the house was finished, a sprawling 7-room structure that included a separate bedroom for each child and a proper dining room where the family gathered each evening for supper. Wade had also built up a small herd of his own cattle, with Mr. Henderson's blessing to graze them on ranch land in exchange for Wade's continued work as foreman. Josephine had stopped teaching when Henry was born, finding that 3 children required her full attention, but she remained active in the community. She organized a lending library in the church basement, giving the town's residents access to books they might not otherwise be able to afford. She helped new teachers settle into Eureka Springs, remembering how daunting it had been to arrive alone in a strange town. She hosted social gatherings at their home, with Wade at her side, both of them becoming respected pillars of the community. One evening in 1892, as they sat together on their porch watching the sun set while their children played in the yard, Wade reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. 14 years had passed since that day in July when a bullet had brought them together. 14 years of building a life neither had thought possible during their lonely, grief-stricken years before. "What are you thinking about?" Josephine asked, noting the contemplative expression on his face. "Just how far we have come," Wade replied, reaching over to take her hand. "Do you remember that night on the hillside when you told me you were afraid of goodbye? I remember every word of that conversation. It was when I knew for certain that I loved you. I told you then that we should make every moment count. I think we have done that, do not you?" Josephine squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with unshed tears of happiness. "We have done more than that. We have built a beautiful life, Wade, a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. Our children will have children, and they will tell them stories about the cowboy and the schoolteacher who found each other in a small Arkansas town and loved each other enough to overcome every obstacle. I am not afraid anymore," Wade said suddenly, "of staying, of commitment, of any of it. This is exactly where I am supposed to be. You are exactly who I am supposed to be with. I have never been more certain of anything." As if to punctuate his words, William called out from the yard where he was playing with his siblings. "Papa, come see what we built. It is a fort like you described from your cowboy days." Wade laughed and stood, pulling Josephine up with him. They walked hand in hand to admire their children's creation, a haphazard structure of branches and old blankets that leaned precariously to one side, but had been constructed with such earnest effort that neither parent had the heart to critique it. "It is perfect," Wade declared, crouching down to peer inside the fort where Margaret had arranged her collection of rocks and Henry clutched his favorite wooden horse. "The best fort I have ever seen." "Will you tell us a story about the old days?" William begged, as he often did. "About when you used to travel all over and have adventures." Wade glanced at Josephine, who smiled and nodded her encouragement. He settled onto the ground with his children gathered around him, Josephine sitting close enough that their shoulders touched. And as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Wade told stories of his wandering years, but he made sure his children understood the most important part. "Those adventures were exciting," he said as the story wound down, "but they were also lonely. I did not understand then what I know now, that the greatest adventure of all is not found in distant places or dangerous situations. It is found in love, in family, in building something lasting with someone who sees the best in you even when you cannot see it yourself. Like you and Mama." Margaret asked, her voice sleepy. "Exactly like me and Mama." Wade looked at his wife over the heads of their children, his heart so full of love he thought it might burst. "Your mother taught me that making every moment count does not mean chasing excitement or running from place to place. It means being present for the people you love, showing up every single day and choosing them over and over again." Josephine reached across to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his weathered skin. "And you taught me that goodbye is not something to fear when you have someone willing to stay. That love can heal even the deepest wounds if you let it." They carried their sleepy children inside and tucked them into their beds, then retired to their own room where they held each other close, thankful for every moment that had led them to this place. Wade traced the thin scar on Josephine's shoulder, still visible after all these years, a permanent reminder of how fate had brought them together. "You ever wish it had happened differently?" he asked quietly. "That you had not been shot, that we had met some other way?" "Never," Josephine replied firmly. "That bullet brought you into my life, and I would endure it 1,000 times over for the gift of you, of us, of this family we have created. Every moment has counted, Wade, every single one." The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and holidays, by the small triumphs and tragedies that make up any life. William grew into a fine young man, working alongside his father on the ranch and showing a natural talent for animal husbandry. Margaret became a teacher like her mother, taking over Josephine's old position at the schoolhouse when Miss Cooper retired. Henry developed an unexpected head for business, helping Wade manage the books for their growing cattle operation. Wade and Josephine aged gracefully together, their hair graying and their faces lining but their love remaining as strong as ever. They became grandparents when William married in 1903 and welcomed his first child the following year, a boy named Wade Jr., who had his grandfather's dark eyes and mischievous smile. Margaret and Henry followed with their own marriages and children, filling the Richardson house with noise and laughter on Sundays when the whole family gathered. Through it all, Wade never once expressed regret for the wandering life he had given up. The restlessness that had driven him for so many years had been replaced by a deep contentment, a satisfaction in watching his family flourish and his legacy take root in the rich Arkansas soil. He had found his place at last, and it was exactly where he was meant to be. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, Wade took Josephine back to the hillside where he had first told her he loved her, where he had proposed, where they had shared so many important moments over the years. They were in their 50s now, their bodies moving slower than they once had. But when Wade pulled Josephine close for a dance to music only they could hear, they moved together as easily as they had on their wedding night. "Thank you," Josephine said, her head resting on his shoulder as they swayed in the fading light. "For what, my love? For staying. For choosing us, choosing me, every single day for 25 years. For making every moment count just like you promised you would." "It has been my greatest honor and joy," Wade replied, meaning every word. "You saved my life that day in the street, Josephine, though not in the way anyone might think. You saved me from a life half lived, from running away from everything I truly wanted. You gave me a reason to be brave enough to stay." They stood together on that hillside as the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their remarkable story. Around them, the town of Eureka Springs continued its bustling life, growing and changing as towns do. But some things remained constant, enduring against the passage of time. The love between Wade and Josephine Richardson was one of those eternal things, a testament to the power of choosing courage over fear, presence over flight, connection over solitude. They had taken the worst moments of their lives, the loss and grief and loneliness that had defined them when they met, and transformed them into something beautiful and lasting. As they walked back down the hillside toward home, toward the family and life they had built together, Wade thought about that young man he had once been. The drifter with no roots and no future, running from place to place because he did not know how to stand still. That version of himself felt like a stranger now, someone from a story told long ago. He had become someone new in the years since meeting Josephine, someone better and stronger and more complete. She had given him that gift, the chance to evolve into the man he was always meant to be. And in return, he had given her his whole heart, his loyalty, his commitment to making every single moment of their shared life matter. The house came into view, lights glowing warmly in the windows, smoke curling from the chimney where Margaret was no doubt preparing the anniversary supper she had insisted on cooking for her parents. Through the windows, Wade could see his children and grandchildren moving about, setting the table, corralling the little ones, creating the organized chaos that defined family gatherings. "Look at what we made," Josephine said softly, following his gaze. "Look at all the love that has grown from that one moment of bravery, of choosing to risk our hearts one more time despite everything we had lost." "It is extraordinary," Wade agreed. "But then, you have always been extraordinary, Josephine Richardson. The most extraordinary thing that ever happened to me." They entered their home together, greeted by the joyful cacophony of family, by grandchildren clamoring for hugs and children presenting them with gifts and good wishes. The dinner table stretched the length of their dining room, extended with extra boards to accommodate everyone, groaning under the weight of favorite dishes and special treats. As Wade sat at the head of the table with Josephine beside him, surrounded by the fruits of their love and partnership, he offered a blessing that came straight from his heart. "Thank you for this food, for this family, for every blessing we have been given. Thank you especially for the woman beside me, who taught me that home is not a place but a person, and that the bravest thing a man can do is stay and fight for what he loves. May we always remember to make every moment count, just as we have tried to do for these past 25 years. A chorus of "Amen" rose from the gathered family, and then the meal began in earnest, with conversation and laughter flowing as freely as the food. Wade found himself reflecting on the truth of what he had said. Josephine had indeed taught him that home was a person, and he had spent a quarter-century proving that he could be her home in return, a safe harbor in any storm, a steady presence she could always count on. After dinner, as the younger ones were put to bed in various rooms throughout the house, and the adult children cleaned up the remains of the feast, Wade and Josephine slipped away to their bedroom. They prepared for sleep with the comfortable familiarity of decades together, each knowing the other's routines as well as their own. In bed, with Josephine nestled against his side in the position that had become second nature over the years, Wade stared at the ceiling and counted his blessings. 3 healthy, happy children who had grown into fine adults. 7 grandchildren so far, with more surely to come. A successful ranch that would provide for generations of Richardsons. A community that respected and valued him. And most precious of all, the woman beside him, his partner in every sense of the word. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness, though he had spoken those words thousands of times over their years together. "I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Josephine replied, her hand finding his and lacing their fingers together. "You are my greatest adventure, Wade Richardson. Every moment with you has counted, and I would not change a single thing about our story." They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, hearts beating in tandem, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from their shared courage. Outside their window, the Arkansas night settled over Eureka Springs, full of possibilities and promises yet to be fulfilled. Years continued to accumulate, bringing with them the inevitable changes of aging. Wade's hair went completely white, and his joints grew stiff on cold mornings. Josephine developed a cough that lingered through winters, and her hands trembled slightly when she did detailed work. But their minds remained sharp, and their love burned as brightly as ever, undimmed by the passage of time. In 1910, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a grand party that drew people from all over Carroll County. Wade was 74 now, Josephine 67, and they stood before their assembled friends and family still holding hands, still looking at each other with the same devotion that had marked their early courtship. Their children and grandchildren had prepared speeches honoring them, telling stories of their kindness and wisdom, their generosity and strength. But the moment that moved everyone to tears came when Wade himself took the floor, his voice still strong despite his advanced years. 50 years ago, I married the love of my life in the church on the hill. I was a different man then, uncertain and afraid of my own capacity for commitment. But Josephine saw something in me worth believing in, worth taking a chance on. She told me once that she was afraid of goodbye, and I promised her that we would make every moment count. Looking back over these 50 years, I can say with absolute certainty that we kept that promise. He turned to face Josephine fully, taking both her hands in his. Every sunrise we watched together counted. Every meal we shared, every conversation we had, every challenge we faced as partners, All of it counted. The birth of our children counted. The building of our home counted. The quiet evenings on the porch after a long day of work counted. Even the difficult times, the disagreements and the hardships, those counted too, because they taught us how to bend without breaking, how to forgive and grow stronger together. Tears streamed down Josephine's face as she listened to her husband's words. "You have given me a beautiful life," she said when it was her turn to speak. "When I lost my first family to fever, I thought I would never know happiness again. But you showed me that love can bloom even in soil salted with tears. You taught me that staying is the bravest choice of all, that committing to someone and building a life together takes more courage than running ever could. Thank you, Wade Richardson, for every moment of these 50 years. I would choose you again and again in this life and whatever comes after." The celebration continued long into the evening, with music and dancing and more food than any gathering could reasonably consume. Wade danced with Josephine as they had on their wedding day, moving slowly now but with no less grace, their bodies still fitting together like pieces of a puzzle made complete. As the party wound down and the guests began to depart, each stopped to embrace Wade and Josephine, to thank them for the example they had set of what marriage could be at its best. Young couples looked at them with hope in their eyes, seeing proof that love could last, could thrive, could remain vibrant even after half a century. That night, as they settled into bed exhausted but happy, Josephine asked Wade the same question she had posed so many times over the years. "Do you ever wonder what your life would have been like if we had never met? If you had kept drifting from place to place?" Wade considered this seriously, as he always did, though his answer never changed. "I imagine I would have ended up old and alone, with nothing to show for all those years but faded memories of places I passed through. No family, no legacy, no love to warm me in my final days. I would have had adventures, perhaps, but I would have missed out on the one thing that makes life worth living. You, Josephine, us, this family we created. I cannot even imagine that empty existence now, and I am profoundly grateful I never had to live it." "I am grateful too," she whispered, "for the bullet that brought us together, for your decision to stay, for every single moment we have shared." They drifted off to sleep, comfortable in their certainty that they had lived well, loved well, and left the world better than they found it. Their children would carry on their legacy, and their grandchildren would pass down stories of the cowboy and the schoolteacher who had found each other in a moment of crisis and built an enduring love from the rubble of their separate tragedies. Wade Richardson passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1913, at the age of 77. He had been working in the garden that afternoon, planting vegetables for the summer season, and had complained of being tired. Josephine had insisted he rest, and he had lain down for a nap from which he never woke. The grief that swept through Eureka Springs at his passing was testament to the impact he had made during his 35 years in the community. People spoke of his generosity, his fairness, his willingness to help anyone in need. But mostly they spoke of his devotion to his wife, of the way he had looked at her until his very last day as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. Josephine bore her loss with the same quiet strength that had seen her through every challenge life had thrown at her. She mourned deeply, the hole left by Wade's absence impossible to fill, but she did not crumble. Their children rallied around her, providing support and company, making sure she was never alone unless she chose to be. In the months following Wade's death, Josephine spent many hours on their hillside, the place where so much of their love story had unfolded. She would sit on the blanket that had been present for so many important moments and talk to Wade as if he could still hear her. updating him on the grandchildren's accomplishments and the small dramas of daily life. "You kept your promise," she told him one evening as the sun set in spectacular shades of orange and purple. "Every moment counted, Wade, every single one. And even though you are gone now, even though I have to face the goodbye I was always so afraid of, I would not trade our time together for anything. The love we shared, the life we built, it was worth any amount of pain that comes from losing it." Josephine lived for 3 more years after Wade's death, remaining active and engaged with her family and community despite her advancing age. She continued to manage the lending library, to host gatherings at the house, to dote on her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But those who knew her best could see that part of her was simply marking time, waiting to be reunited with the man she had loved for more than half her life. She passed away in her sleep in February 1916, on a night when fresh snow fell on Eureka Springs, making everything clean and new. She was 73 years old, and according to Margaret, who had been staying with her that week, her last words were, "I am coming, Wade. Wait for me." They buried Josephine beside Wade on a hillside overlooking the valley, in the same spot where they had shared so many important moments. The entire town turned out for her funeral, wanting to pay their respects to a woman who had touched countless lives with her kindness and dedication. Her former students, now adults with children of their own, spoke of the impact she had made on their education and their lives. But the most moving tribute came from William, now a gray-haired man of 56 himself, who stood before the gathered mourners and told the story of his parents' love. He spoke of the day they met, of Wade's decision to stay in Eureka Springs despite his wandering nature, of the promise they had made to each other to make every moment count. "My parents taught me what it means to truly love someone," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "They showed me that the measure of a life well lived is not found in wealth or status, but in the relationships we nurture and the love we give." They took their fear of goodbye and transformed it into a commitment to presence, to showing up for each other every single day regardless of what challenges they faced. He looked at his siblings, at his children and grandchildren, at the legacy his parents had created through their devotion to each other and their family. "We are all here because Wade Richardson heard a gunshot 38 years ago and chose to help a stranger. Because Josephine Miller pushed a man out of the way of a bullet and ended up in that stranger's arms. Because 2 wounded souls decided to take a chance on love one more time, even though they had every reason to protect their hearts." As the funeral concluded and people began to disperse, the Richardson family lingered at the graveside. They stood together in the fading light, multiple generations united by the love story that had started it all. Margaret held her youngest grandchild, a girl of 3 who bore Josephine's name. Henry had his arm around his wife, their children clustered close. William stood with his sons and daughters, all of them successful ranchers and teachers and business people who carried forward the values Wade and Josephine had instilled. "You think they are together now?" Margaret asked quietly. "Do you think Papa was waiting for Mama like he always promised he would?" "I know he was," William replied with certainty. "Death could not end what they had." That kind of love, the kind that transforms everything it touches, that transcends time and circumstance and every obstacle, that kind of love is eternal. As the family made their way back down the hillside toward their various homes, the sun broke through the clouds for just a moment, casting golden light over the 2 simple headstones that marked Wade and Josephine Richardson's final resting place. The stones were inscribed with their names, their dates, and beneath that, a single line that summed up everything they had meant to each other. Every moment counted. In the years that followed, The Richardson family continued to grow and flourish, spreading throughout Arkansas and beyond. They became ranchers and teachers, doctors and lawyers, artists and entrepreneurs. But no matter how far they traveled or what paths they chose, they all carried with them the story of their ancestors. The cowboy and the schoolteacher who had found each other in a moment of crisis and built a love strong enough to last through everything life threw at them. Eureka Springs continued to grow as well, evolving from a small frontier town into a thriving community while still maintaining its unique character and charm. The Richardson name became synonymous with integrity and hard work, with the kind of values that built strong communities and lasting legacies. The house Wade had built for his family remained standing, carefully maintained by successive generations who understood its significance. The hillside where Wade and Josephine had shared so many important moments became a favored spot for Richardson family gatherings. Young couples would go there for picnics, unknowingly sitting in the same place where their great-great-grandparents had once sat. Children would play on the slope, their laughter echoing across the valley just as William, Margaret, and Henry's laughter had echoed more than a century before. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the light was just right and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers, people claimed they could feel something special about that hillside. A sense of peace, of enduring love, of promises kept and moments treasured. Whether it was truly the lingering presence of Wade and Josephine's love, or simply the power of a story well told, it inspired countless other couples to take their own chances on love, to face their fears of loss and goodbye and choose connection anyway. Because that was the true legacy of Wade and Josephine Richardson. Not just the children they raised or the businesses they built or the community they served, but the example they set. They proved that love was worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth committing to even when every instinct said to run. They showed that making every moment count was not about grand gestures or dramatic adventures, but about the quiet, steady choice to show up for the person you loved, day after day, year after year, through all the seasons of a life shared. Their story became legend in Eureka Springs, told and retold with varying degrees of accuracy, but always capturing the essential truth at its heart. A wounded woman and a wandering cowboy who found in each other something neither had been looking for but both desperately needed. A reason to hope again. A reason to love again. A reason to believe that even the most broken hearts could heal if given enough courage and care. And in the end, they had built something beautiful from their chance encounter on a dusty street in July 1878. They had taken fear and transformed it into faith. They had taken goodbye and turned it into forever. They had made every single moment count, just as Wade had promised they would on that long-ago evening when Josephine first confessed her deepest fear. Their love story ended not with goodbye but with reunion, with the certainty that what they had created together could not be diminished by something as temporary as death. They had lived fully, loved completely, and left behind a legacy that would continue to inspire for generations to come. In the cemetery overlooking Eureka Springs, two simple headstones stood side by side, marking the final resting place of Wade and Josephine Richardson. But they were not truly gone. They lived on in every descendant who chose love over fear, in every couple who faced their challenges together rather than running apart, in every person who understood that the greatest adventure of all is found not in distant lands but in the heart of someone who sees you, truly sees you, and chooses to stay anyway. Every moment had counted. Every sunrise, every sunset, every laugh and tear and whispered word of love, 50 years of marriage and a lifetime of devotion, all of it mattering, all of it adding up to something greater than the sum of its parts. A love story for the ages, played out against the backdrop of the American West, proving that the wildest frontier of all is the human heart, and the courage it takes to give that heart fully to another person. This was the story of She told the cowboy she was afraid of goodbye. He said then, let's make every moment count. And in the living of it, in the choosing of each other over and over again through all the years they were given, Wade and Josephine Richardson had done exactly that. They had made every moment count, and in doing so, they had created something that would last forever.